Our understanding is that justice and equity and climate justice is a core value of the plant-based treaties work. How does that intersect with food sovereignty, indigenous rights, and equitable access to plant-based foods?
Yeah, maybe I can get started on that. I think, yeah, those are really, really big topics and important topics in food justice. I think in terms of food sovereignty, one of the big things that come to mind is the way that industrial meat companies are pushing into countries that have not historically had a lot of animal product consumption. And so this is just a new version of colonialism that's happening, especially in Africa. And so we're working with local communities and they're pushing back against that. And so that's an example of food sovereignty and how that overlaps with plant-based treaty. Another example that you mentioned is Indigenous rights. And so, we know that up to 80% of deforestation in the Amazon is due to the expansion of animal agriculture. And that deforestation is directly impacting local communities, local indigenous communities that have lived on that land for millennia, making an effort to stop the expansion of animal agriculture through reducing the demand for animal products is essential to stop the deforestation from happening in places like the Amazon.
Another example of what Kimmy's talking about, the meat, dairy, and egg companies pushing into countries that don't have that are largely plant-based, is the case of Hatching Hope. It's a project of Cargill and Heifer International, which is a nonprofit, and Cargill is one of the biggest meat packing companies and commodity traders. And the Hatching Hope project is an astroturf operation. They're trying to get 100 million people in Asia to do backyard chicken operations by 2030. And so this is in India and other Asian countries there. They've also succeeded in getting development groups like Oxfam and others to promote goat passing and, for Christmas, for the holidays. So that's something that we've tried to campaign against, and we've had some success. So some of the Oxfam chapters have stopped promoting, purchase a goat and expand animal agriculture, in Africa or Asia. So that's something to keep our eyes on because when you look at the fossil fuel treaty, when they set up the treaty, they were not looking at just demand, but supply. So a lot of these companies are pushing meat, dairy, and egg consumption where it doesn't exist. And they're increasing diabetes, deforestation, excessive water use, biodiversity loss. So when we think of the plant-based treaty, we should not only think about demand and how to increase diet change and things like that. We also have to look at supply. And rather than promoting meat, dairy, and egg consumption, we should be promoting the consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds, and whole food, grains. So I think it's really important to have a scissors approach. So the upper blade might be demand and the lower blade is supply. So when you cut a piece of paper, you need scissors, you need the upper and lower blade. And, to address this issue of changing the global food system, we really have to look at both supply and demand.
It's essential that we are creating a food system that works for everybody. So we are prioritizing, when we speak to counselors and when we speak to policymakers, that we're talking about, let's shift towards more plant-based food. And what that means is that everybody should be having more access to healthy, sustainable, delicious food at every level. So whether we're talking to people at the city government, and we're talking about things like farmers markets and local procurement practices or food in schools, or we're talking at the country level and higher levels of government where they're actually able to, determine where subsidies are going and determine what the food landscape looks like. So it's really essential that everybody is having access to healthy plant-based food, and that means lots of fruits and vegetables. Yeah, I think it really intersects with all those topics.
Thank you. Sam, did you have anything to add?
So for me, I want to give a little bit of background of how I even got into plant-based treaty is, I've always wanted to use policy to help the animals. And I was very much involved with political clubs here locally. And when I presented these issues to our political friends, and political activist, I really made a strong connection of how intersectional the food system is to a lot of the equitable problems that we face in our society right now. Because not only is this a food justice, climate justice, and the environmental justice issue, it's also a workers' rights issue. And also, the intersectionality of food and politics and the environmental degradation that's happening on our planet right now is so important for us to take action. And food system is one of the most simple and straightforward levers that we can use to help our planet and to provide food justice for all. And we were just at COP. The climate conference in Belém, Brazil. And it was so powerful and inspirational to see indigenous groups come to COP. Only 3 groups were represented, and a lot of other ones were outside of the conference, demanding justice for their habitats, because a lot of the large corporations, the biggest meat packing industries and companies are taking away their land, their homes, and the rivers. And so they are protesting, and demanding that they have justice for their habitat and fighting for the forest and fighting for the living beings that's also inhabiting the forests. So this is a very important issue for us to fight. Not only is it for the food system, but it's also for us to fight for food justice and environmental justice.
That's great. Yeah. We have been working on a policy in California called the California Deforestation Free Procurement Act. And that policy would ensure that when the government of California, the state, buys products that come from the tropical forest, that they make sure that they're buying them, that the contractors are buying them from good actors who are not contributing to deforestation. And one of the pillars of that policy was ensuring that these companies respect indigenous rights. We're still working on that policy, and it's an uphill battle because of the entrenched interests, but those indigenous rights are key to saving the rainforest.